William, hopefully your favorite videographer from Two Hats Publishing. I welcome you to another Two Hats special of community events. Let's look in and see what's really happening.
Get started. Thank you everybody for being here this evening. As you all know, in early May, Mayor Mike Rawlings created the Dallas Commission on Homelessness, which has been charged with analyzing the community's current system for addressing homelessness. The Homeless Commission, made up of 36 members, was broken up into subcommittees, including a community engagement subcommittee, to listen to the community regarding its concerns and solutions for homelessness in Dallas. Your feedback will be used for recommendations to the Dallas Homeless Commission, the City Council, the Mayor, and others to solve homelessness. Over the next 6 weeks, the Commission will be hosting multiple forums in various locations throughout the city with the purpose of educating, engaging, and gathering feedback from the community about their experiences, challenges, and solutions for homelessness in Dallas. Tonight's meeting is on sheltering the homeless. Tomorrow we have another meeting on homeless in East Dallas. We will also be hosting meetings on mental health, housing, innovation, homeless youth, and those who are currently experiencing homelessness. I'd like to recognize the Community Engagement Subcommittee members who are responsible for putting tonight's meeting on. If they'll stand up, Krista Nightingale, Steve Davies, David Gruber, Bill Vandervoort. If there are other commissioners attending tonight, if they will stand up so that we can recognize you. Welcome. Thank you. Thank you for attending this evening. Do we have any city council present? I know I saw Councilmember Medrano. Thank you for being here. A couple things really important before we get started. We have some hashtags that are on the board tonight, solutions and Dallas homelessness. We also have the Twitter handles of all of the fine people that are up here participating. If you will engage and send your questions and communicate about tonight's meeting. We also have a Facebook page, a website, an email, and a Twitter. So there is lots of opportunities to provide feedback. We also have a survey that many of you got when you came in. If you will take the time to fill out that survey and turn it in at the end of the evening. We also have work boards out front that have Post-its. Several of you filled out some suggestions and some solutions, recommendations when you came in. If at the end of tonight you think of some other things, those boards are still out there. If you will go out there and write down a few more comments. All right, I guess we're ready to get started. I'm going to introduce our moderator this evening, Eric Nicholson with the Dallas Observer. Eric is a staff writer at the Dallas Observer who has reported extensively on homelessness, poverty, and what they mean in Dallas. He has chronicled the rise and fall of Tent City, the sprawling encampment recently removed from beneath Interstate 45, and explored how downtown's emergence as a residential neighborhood has reframed the way the city talks about homelessness. Thank you for being here.
Okay. Thank you, Tanya. I appreciate the introduction. Just a word of, I guess, warning. There are many reasons I got into print journalism instead of broadcasts, and one of them is that I don't particularly enjoy having my face be in front of everybody. So just keep that in mind and be forgiving, please. But yeah, I'm going to introduce the panel. So starting on my left. is Bob Sweeney, the Executive Director of Dallas Life Foundation, Daniel Roby, Daniel Roby, Executive Director of Austin Street Center. Okay. Blake Fetterman, the Executive Director of Salvation Army, DFW. And Pastor Wayne Walker, who is the founder of Our Calling. Okay, so first I want to go through and have you guys sort of introduce yourselves and tell me what your organization does. If you're shelter, what's your shelter capacity, and then more broadly, sort of like what is your philosophy and that sort of thing. So, Bob, do you want to start?
Sure. At Dallas Life, we could house up to 500 people each night. We average about 380. Our focus is really long-term recovery programs. We also have homeless programs for the senior citizen and the disabled. We average about 80 children per night that are there with one, most of the time one, occasionally two parents. Our emphasis is recovery more than just right off the street. We have a couple of different programs. One is what we call pay to stay, where we ask $10 per night for homeless people that are staying with us longer than 5 days that do not want a long-term recovery program. Most of those folks are working and paying as they go. Our costs are $24.75 per night to keep every man, every woman, and every child. So we're by no means making huge income on that. We never charge for a child to stay. Second way for a person to stay with us is through our long-term Homeless No More 10-month program that I wrote 17 years ago that has a 90% success rate. And then lastly, we have about 30 in our senior citizen and disabled program as well. We're 60 years old and have been in Dallas since 1954.
Daniel?
So Austin Street Center has been around for about 33 years. And we were founded with the belief that homelessness isn't just about houselessness, it's also about unwantedness. That's a quote from Mother Teresa, who's a big hero of mine. And the focus for us is serving the most vulnerable. Now, that could be debated. How do you define most vulnerable? For us, that's men who are over the age of 45, because we've seen health studies that have shown someone who is 45 on the streets has the health conditions of someone who's 60 or 70 and housed. We also serve women who are over the age of 18. The reason why we don't have the age requirements for women that we have for men is because of a study that we saw. It was actually done in Fort Worth. Cindy Crane from MDHA put me onto this study, and it's basically that 78% of women who are on the streets are sexually victimized during their experience on the streets. And so we're trying to minimize that as much that we can by providing ongoing shelter for them as well. Austin Street is it's an exceptional place. We have over of the 1,000 people that have come in our doors from January to May of this year. 100 of those were veterans. We had 350 have had a mental health diagnosis. 400 have a chronic health condition. Over 250 have a physical disability. We also have several people with developmental disabilities. So we have a lot of really needy folks. The recent point in time count viewed Austin Street as having 28% of the chronically homeless. I'm not sure how they determine that number, but of the sheltered chronically homeless, 28% of them are at Austin Street. So, besides that, we're a big engagement place for the community. So we are the Dallas community serving its homeless neighbors. Of the 30,000 plus meals that we serve every month, all of those are provided by our church and business and civic partners that come and serve inside of our building for lunch and dinner of every day. So that's Austin Street.
Good. So the Salvation Army has been in Dallas for 125 years, and at our current location at the Carpy Collins Center, we have been providing homeless recovery and prevention services for 30 years. We do offer a wide array of services, like Bob and Daniel do at their centers. We do start with homeless prevention programming, trying to keep folks from having to leave their homes and enter the shelter system. From there, we have emergency and transitional shelter for men, women, and women with children. Capacity in those programs is 230 a night. Our philosophy of care in our emergency shelter programming is come in, we'll ask questions later. We believe that having the most low barrier access to services is the way to engage folks into shelter. So all that we really ask is if you're homeless, and because we have children, we can't serve sex offenders, but if they don't want services, if they don't want to engage beyond just coming in for a safe place to sleep and a meal, that's fine. But if they do want services to be able to transition out of the homeless cycle, then we've got services to support that. We also have some specialty programs. So we have transitional housing for 110 veterans who are experiencing homelessness, and they can stay with us for up to 2 years. That's in partnership with the VA, which is an amazing, amazing partnership that we're very lucky to have. We also have specialty programs for women and children who are fleeing domestic violence. Now that shelter is in a safe, undisclosed location, but it is part of the overall operations that we have at Carpi Collins Center. So we really are trying to address and tackle homelessness from a variety of different ways.
Wayne?
Great. So our calling is not a shelter. And I was wondering why I was invited here. Our calling is a discipleship ministry for the homeless. We work on the streets every single day with the unsheltered population. So we work with those individuals that are not in shelters or refuse to go. Currently, we're tracking details on about 7,200 individuals. We know we're serving about 1,500 more that are not in our system. Thousands of individuals that are sleeping outside every night. And our primary focus is personal relationships with those individuals in order to invest in long-term change. And so we're every day trying to introduce them to the shelters in town and the different programs throughout the city. We have over 5,000 volunteer positions a year. So as Blake said, we have an army of folks in Dallas serving those folks in Dallas. Individuals that are going out under bridges, going out behind liquor stores, those individuals that seem to be in the paper or on somebody's Twitter feed on a regular basis are people that we know and we care for dearly. Because we primarily work with the unsheltered homeless population, our teams go to over 1,200 locations in town. So if you can think of a place where homeless individuals are, we go there. And we partner with all of the shelters in town as well as many other organizations and actually think of each one of them as a important cog in this wheel of support services for the community. We try to evaluate each homeless person to try to figure out which place would they fit best. And so many of you may know of us because of our book. You know, we've created this directory, which is kind of a menu of homeless services in Dallas. And then last year we launched our app. And our app gives you access to those services in town. We have individuals in Dallas that will use our app to report where new homeless encampments are to us, so then our teams will go out and visit them on the field. And so our teams respond to those calls every single week as well.
All right, thanks guys. So in a sense, I think what started the conversation on homelessness right now is Tent City, which I'm sure if you're here, you're all familiar with it. It was the homeless encampment, which I think topped out at maybe 400 residents a few months ago and was cleared out by the city in early May. So Daniel, I'm going to toss this to you because Austin Street is a couple of blocks from where Tent City was, and it's kind of a big question, I guess, but sort of in your view, I mean, what caused Tent City, and the second part of that is were you surprised?
Well, I mean, I think that's a well-pointed question. So what caused Tent City, and was I surprised? The cause, I've heard lots of thoughts about that, but I think we need to start with recognizing that the cause is homelessness. I realize there's a lot of other reasons for why folks congregated in that exact location at this exact point in time. But the vast number of unsheltered individuals are a result of a very broken and dysfunctional system of care that begins with the increasing rates of poverty that Dallas is well known for although having some of the largest amounts of millionaires, also having some of the most impoverished neighborhoods in the country. It's also a result of, although there's been a growth in employment, there's not the growth in the type of jobs that a lot of folks that find themselves homeless would be able to qualify for. So I want to start with saying that first, that homelessness is the cause for Tent City. But in response to that specific place, some of the challenges were that some folks have been directed there. That's what I've heard anyway. I guess I can't confirm that, but from what I've heard in the community, there were some encampments where people were encouraged, hey, find your way down to Tent City. There are services there. After they began building some infrastructure like, some bathrooms and, some trash containers and, began prioritizing people for housing. All those things together took what was already a large but normal encampment of maybe 100 to 150 people to what it ended up being at 400 plus.
Okay. And so they, like as I mentioned, they closed Tent City. They cleared it out in early May. There's a lot of that causes a lot of, I think, heartburn among a lot of people to see that visual of these sort of desperate people who are being sort of shoved aside, and it seems like the same things that happened over and over. But I mean, how many? Just a show of hands, really quick. I mean, how many of you think that Tent City should have been allowed to remain in some form underneath I-45? Okay. Bob, so explain to me sort of, why can't we just have a community of homeless people underneath I-45, like Tent City? I mean, what are the problems that arise, and why do you think that something needed to be done?
I went into Tent City and took a staff of 10 people, knowing that around the 6th of May, that week they were going to close it down. So we went 3 weeks before and began going every other day, just going tent to tent. And many of the people that we saw in the tents, most of us on this panel, have seen multiple times. At Dallas Life, our goal is seeking those who want recovery. So I wanted to find those we would be able to extract out. Why do I think some of them are there? I thought some were there because they did not want to partake in a normative society. But I represent donors, and I represent a mindset that we want to do everything we can to point out to someone there's a better way of life. If they embrace that in any way whatsoever, our programs, our mores, our values, if we're able to connect with them on anything that they learned when they were younger, they would show us there was a step they were willing to take in the right direction. We did everything we could to extract them out. Do I think it should be permitted to stay that way? No, I believe there were some people. One gentleman said to me, I don't do shelters. I said, so could tell me why? I don't do shelters. Has there been a bad experience you've had? I don't do shelters. I said, do you sound how ridiculous you sound? Do you hear that? Because we're not even in a conversation. So I don't think that it should be permitted to continue. I don't think it was beneficial to add bathrooms and add trash and or ability to dump your trash and all of that. I went from tent to tent and saw people eating sandwiches that were 2 and 3 days old that I knew would make them sick within the hour anyway. So our goal was to extract them out.
So Wayne, Bob touched on a point that a lot of the people in Tent City, they're there because the options that are available, they don't necessarily want to take them. The shelter, they don't want to go to the shelters. You are focused a lot on sort of reaching out to, I think, those people among others. But I mean, how do you build that relationship, and how do you change people's minds, for lack of a better term?
So if you're going to make significant change in life, you're probably not going to poll a stranger. I don't think anybody in this room went up to a stranger on the street and asked, where should I work, where should I live, what should I do with the rest of my life, who should I marry? And so it's important for us to build these personal relationships week after week, month after month. I mean, I know homeless individuals that I've known in Dallas for over 15 years. And once we build this relationship with them and there's some trust involved, we're able to really encourage them to consider making a change in life. I know so many guys that panhandle, and I can beg them until I turn blue in the face to please stop doing that, because I know what they're doing with the money. But if someone downtown pulls out a $20 bill and hands it to me, I'm probably not going to turn it down, right? So how do you get someone to change when change is difficult? How do you get them to change and consider an option when failure is the only thing they've seen for years? And false promises is the only thing they've realized and expected. Many of the people that moved to Tent City moved there because of, there was a promise of housing, there was a promise of services to be available, and we've seen that sometimes those promises are great in a vacuum, but in reality they just don't exist. And so when we go out, we're not really expecting to change someone's mind the first time we meet them. We developed an app that you haven't seen that's on our systems where we track intimate details on everybody we serve. And every program here has one, and they're all different. But when I meet with somebody, I want to know how many times we've seen them and what they've been struggling with for the last few years, and who in our organization's building a relationship with them, and where are the GPS coordinates we've seen them before. So as we walk into this relationship with either a friend that you may know from high school or college, or a friend that I may know under a bridge, once there's some trust in there, then we're able to convince them to go into a facility. Friday, I sat down with a woman I've known for 2 years who is a victim of horrible sex trafficking. And we can beg her to go into a placement. We can physically take her there, but until she wants to go, until she decides she's sick and tired of being this way, and until she makes that volitional opportunity, there's nowhere we can take her.
So Blake, touching on something you mentioned before, you described the Salvation Army as sort of a low barrier shelter. Can you elaborate a little more on sort of what that means and why you think it's important to have as few barriers to entry as possible?
Well, I think it kind of mirrors a little bit about what Wayne is talking about in terms of giving folks an opportunity to at least try something without having a lot of requirements put on you. And so the philosophy or the approach that we take is come in. We're going to ask you some questions. We need to know what your name is and whatnot, right? But if you don't have ID, that's okay. If you're not sober, that's okay. If you're not stable with your behavioral health, that's okay. Come in, get a safe place to sleep, get a hot meal. Let's see where you're at tomorrow. Are you ready tomorrow? No? Okay. Now we do have a time limit, right? So we say for 30 consecutive nights, do that. We will not ask anything of you. If past 30 nights you're still not ready for a commitment, we're going to say, okay, it's time to give someone else an opportunity, because the need is so great in the homeless community. And so it's time to give somebody else a chance. Come back and see us when you're ready. But really, folks shouldn't have to work for a fundamental human right of a place to sleep. And that's our philosophy.
So I want to ask this of each of you guys, and I expect the answer will vary. But I mean, as an organization, how do you measure success? And I guess this could both be on an individual basis, like with one individual person you're talking about, and then in terms of sort of like data, how do you track like the number of nights stayed, like housing placements, things like that? And I guess start with Bob again.
We measure a number of things. We measure through Dallas Seminary, we have 24 counselors that are doing all of their master's level, hundreds and hundreds of hours in our facility. So we require that they see a counselor. So we're tracking whether they regularly go to a weekly meeting with their individual one-on-one counselor. We also offer group, children's, premarital, and others. We measure if they signed up for any available low-income housing options that are afforded of them. We also measure if they're regularly going to their classes. I mandate that they fill out 15 job applications evaluations every week when they get in the third phase of my program in order to stay. So I mandate and we measure the data on them getting a part-time job. To graduate from the program, they must have a full-time job, either through one job or a combination of two jobs. We connect them with their family again, and we make sure that that family relationship is being built. We put them in computer school and make sure they have a working knowledge of how to do a resume, how to write out their job experience, how to schedule their own job interviews. We measure that data. And so over a 5-year period, we have tracked the data of every person that's gone through our program and found 90% of them did those things.
Daniel?
So Austin Street is a little bit different in how we're structured, and I haven't really gone into this yet. So, I'm evaluating our success based upon are we able to end the homeless experience for each person that we meet. Now, I know a lot of people that have advocated for ending homelessness. I remember sitting on the mayor's council in Portland, Oregon. I'm from Dallas, but I spent 8 years in homeless services in Portland. This was probably 15 years ago, not quite that long, maybe closer to 12 years ago. And when I was up there doing that, they initiated, housing first approach, and they were trying to end homelessness. But we can't control the pipeline in. What we can control is having a excellent and efficient response system when people become homeless. So if you want some data, we have 411 people that we serve every night. We have over 127,000 nights of shelter, that happen throughout the year. We're big on our metrics for getting folks employed and getting folks housed. So ultimately, even though I know very well that there are challenges with a housing first approach, I also recognize that the nature of defining it, the problem as homelessness, the result has to be at some point that person is housed. You can't end that person's homelessness without them having a place to live. So I think it naturally leads our outcomes in that direction. Does that mean that the way that in which that's done is not important? Absolutely not, because I think it's essential that part of it is evaluated with intense scrutiny. But employment, housing, obviously our outputs, number of nights of shelter. Where we're going is going from this data, right? Outputs, nights of shelter, meals served, outcomes, how many people have gotten employed, how many people have gotten housed, to the long range goal of what's the impact we're having in the community as a whole. What does it say about the city of Dallas when we're able to engage people in their most desperate place and have them to the point where they're not only stable but giving back to the community? I haven't figured out how to do that yet, but that's what we're currently talking a lot about.
Blake?
Okay, so for our emergency shelter, like Daniel's, pretty straightforward. It's nights of shelter, meals. It's all about providing for basic needs. In our transitional shelter and veterans programming, again, it's rather straightforward. It's about housing and housing stability. So on average in our veterans programs, 80% successfully transition into housing, with more than 90% remaining, in their housing 6 months after they leave. And then in our non-veterans transitional shelter program, 65% transition into stable housing and 94% keep their housing 6 months after they leave our programming. So a little bit more straightforward, I guess.
And Wayne?
So we often say that we're kind of the last train stop, and because we collect people that really don't fit in anywhere. Individuals that get kicked out of every program in town kind of make their way to our doors, or people that are looking for a program come to our place on a regular basis. When we crawl under a bridge or behind a liquor store, I meet the folks that graduated from program X or are in housing and now have lost it. And so, we see success and failure in a little bit different spectrum. And really what we're trying to do is engage the homeless community to help the homeless community. And so for us, a measure of success is not just taking that guy off the street and helping him move into housing, because we know a lot of people do that, but some of them also lose that, quite a few. But we're trying to see that person actually become part of the solution. So in our organization, what we're trying to do is help that individual be one that not only receives services, but becomes the one that helps provide the services. So when we can engage homeless individuals to now engage other homeless individuals, that's a home run for us. Let me give you one short example. So we see a lot of victims of domestic violence. And I believe the most effective person to address that is a former victim of domestic violence who's overcome that. And so what we're trying to do is see that woman, that man who suffered through that, after they've overcome their situation, come back to us and now be involved in investing back into the community. And so we've got lots of folks that are formerly homeless or now who have once become homeless again that are still investing back in the community. So they're going under the bridges, reaching their brothers and sisters in a way that you and I are not qualified to do.
Okay. My follow-up to that, so when I was doing my reporting on sort of homelessness, I got the distinct impression that a lot of the homeless services were sort of siloed. Dallas Life, they do their thing. Austin Street, they do their thing. And that there's an effort by the Metro Dallas Homeless Alliance to sort of better coordinate services and at the very least have a centralized, I guess, computer system where you can track each individual and where you can keep track of where they've stayed and what their issues are. So I guess show of hands, and Wayne, I don't know if this would apply to you, but has your shelter signed on to the HMIS system, the case management system, or do you plan to?
For me, that's a combined answer.
Okay.
So in our veterans programs, yes, we're already engaged in using the HMIS system, and in our other shelter care programs, we're waiting for the new HMIS system to come online.
Okay. So Bob, how do you, I guess, how do you break down sort of the barriers with other shelters, or do you need to?
Well, we know we serve a distinct group of people. And we know that if a certain individual comes to us we're not able to meet their need, and we know what shelter we can do a referral. But there are times when programs come down that they wish everyone would just embrace, HMIS being one of them. Mm-hmm. We're kind of on the outside just looking in right now. I want to see more of the specifics on how the HMIS plans out to make, for example, we have a payment module. So in our computer system, we have a payment module for those paying $10 a night. So we said to the HMS designers, it's got to be designed so that if we're part of a centralized system, we can still have a payment module attached to that. So we're at the table talking with them and have not yet made the decision. So when we have to refer to another shelter, it's important to know what's offered out there. So in terms of a single point of entry where people know that's the clearinghouse you can go to, we're in favor of that. But we're also in favor of the overarching belief that we don't just serve the homeless. We also have a responsibility to the people who live within walking distance of the homeless that we serve. So if I'm going to be offering housing to 360 people in my shelter, and I have people within very short walking distance that are paying upwards of $1 million for where they live, they do have a right to be knowledgeable in what it is that I offer so that they don't have to be accosted because I've taken everybody.
Okay. Well, Bob, since you touched on it and since you got a smattering of applause, we'll hit on that topic a little bit. So, how do you be a good neighbor? Like you're a homeless shelter, you're a homeless service center. Your clientele is, it's the homeless, and face it, I mean, a lot of people don't necessarily want the homeless in their neighborhoods. So how do you provide your services in a way that is conscious of the fact that there are homeowners, there are businesses, there is, sort of middle-class life happening around you. And Blake, I'll toss it to you.
Yeah, so we're right in the heart of the medical district, and so with Parkland as our neighbor, so we share quite a few folks. But part of what we have done is to enact a good neighbor policy that we educate the folks when they're coming in to our shelter what it means to be a good neighbor. So not loitering, not panhandling, not engaging in criminal activity, and then helping them identify alternative ways to spend their time during the day as opposed to just kind of hanging out outside the Salvation Army. Now, of the 600 folks we shelter a night, there's about 100 of them that do leave during the day. The rest are allowed to stay in, and so that's another way we're a good neighbor, is offering those day shelter services. And then we have a great relationship with the police department. When we need their help and we need help to address some of the issues that we're seeing around in our community, we do engage them to help us with an outreach component, as well as to address any criminal activity that needs to be. And I'm not talking about criminal in terms of quality of life issues. I'm talking about active criminal activity, help address that.
Daniel, you want to take that one too?
How to be a good neighbor?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I feel like being a good neighbor is a lot about how we treat the neighbors we currently have. So if everyone in this room were to think about who are the people that live next to them, and who are the people that live around the corner, and how you treat those people. Do you treat them with kindness? Do you treat them with compassion? Do you respect their boundaries? Do you respect their needs? I think that's how we become a good neighbor as an organization. And I think your topic is extremely important, but I'd also like to bring up that what type of neighbor we are to people who are experiencing homelessness, that matters too. And so it's not one or the other, right? If we respect the importance of the individual person, whether you're homeless, whether you're housed, no matter the dollar amount of the place that you live, in any of those categories, it becomes important that my respect for you and your needs is important. And so I just want to make sure that we bring that up, and partially because, and I'm not going to ask them to identify themselves, but I have a handful of folks in this room tonight that came with me, that came from Austin Street Center. And I think it's just important to recognize that the value of the person is the same, regardless of your living situation. Again, that's not to diminish those that are physical property owners next to the shelter. So I'm currently started the process, and I haven't executed on it yet, but having a good neighbor agreement with several of our neighbors. We're in a spot of town right now that we haven't had the same scrutiny of other shelters, but it's still important. We have groups that kind of march the streets in a 2-block radius and pick up trash, and they do that every single day. So there's definitely cleanup that's happening, and we would love to do more. The reality is we probably need to make some changes with our facilities in order to be able to better queue up people to get more people off the streets. Currently, about half of our beds are reserved. So with the 411 I mentioned, 200 of those are going to be reserved for different reasons. Can I go into this for a second?
Yeah,
Okay.
sure.
So basically, we accept referrals from hospitals, social workers. So if Baylor or Parkland or Methodist or Presby call us and say, hey, I've got someone who's homeless, they need a discharge, but they've got a broken foot, they've got this condition or that condition, can you have them for a couple of weeks? So we're reserved medical costs in that way. We do the same thing with our housing partners. And earlier you were talking about working together in HMIS, and I wanted to mention that because it is extremely important that we work together. We do not have to enter into a contractual agreement to do so. So it is, working together has to do with an internal will and willingness to respect the different designs of each other's programs. With that said, Austin Street has decided to be, we're really the first shelter to my knowledge that has signed a letter of intent for the new HMIS is supposed to be coming out in October. I think most shelters have been, interested in that program, at least at the peripheral level. And we did that because I believe that system-wide, it will make sense for Dallas. It's a big inconvenience for us personally, but for Dallas, I think it makes sense to have a coordinated system. That said, that's just our approach. I respect people that have different opinions. So again, we have about half of our folks that stay in during the day, medical cots, folks that are entering into housing but need a place to stay for a couple weeks on the way, and folks who are currently employed. So we don't want to restrict people saying, hey, you got to stand in line to get in the shelter if you're working, because then obviously you're not going to get a bed in the shelter, right? So we have spots reserved for people who are employed, and they're on basically a 90-day program that says, hey, we're going to help you save, we'll make sure you put money away, and then help you transition into housing once you've saved up enough money. But the reality is we need a lot more resources in Dallas in order to adequately meet the demand of needs that's there, because half of our folks have to leave every day because we physically don't have the space for them.
For us being a good neighbor at Dallas Life, we joined the Cedars Neighborhood Association in which we reside. We've joined the Farmers Market Association. We take our staff to those local restaurants in our area so that there is a visual connection. 11 years ago, when I first came to Dallas, we took our senior citizens over to City Hall to have them just clean up the grounds. Called Councilwoman Pauline Medrano, said, look out the window, and remain friends from that day till now. And so we wanted to give back that way. So we try to engage with the people that live there. We attend meetings. We want to be a voice. We know it's very easy that when one thing happens at homelessness, we all kind of get labeled. And so I do appreciate what Daniel said. It doesn't necessarily mean there has to be a written agreement that binds everybody, but the concept of a centralized system makes a lot of sense. And for us, if we feel like it works for within the context of what we're doing, we'll take a serious look at that.
Okay. So, you see Tent City, and you see now there's right by our calling at Haskell, and then further down Good Latimer, still beneath Interstate 45, there's two pretty large encampments. So, there seems to be evidence that the current system isn't working as effectively as it should. So I'm gonna break this question into two parts, and the first part, I'm going to throw at you, Wayne. In terms of outreach and actually sort of reaching out to those people and connecting those people, what does Dallas need to do better, and how do you do that? Does it need more organizations like Our Calling? Does it need more funding for the existing organizations?
That's a good question. So let me address the HMIS question, because I think that one of the things we need to do is collaborate better. We evaluated HMIS a few years ago, and it just, for our needs, it doesn't meet them. So when we're under a bridge at Haskell and 30, or Good Latimer and Coombs, or the camps that are off of I-20, the prostitutes that live out there that are, and the drug dealers that are working off the truck stops there, or 635 in Shiloh, or 75, and off of, Woodall Rogers or Good Latimer or wherever. We need a system that works on iPads and iPhones, and the current system doesn't do that. And so we need to be able to save GPS coordinates and all that kind of stuff. So coordinating with the organizations would be a huge improvement to the Dallas system. You ask about systems. I was in San Francisco a month ago. I've been on Skid Row. I've been in places in New York. I think some cities have a whole lot more collaboration than we do. I also think that we don't do enough of this. We go to meetings where we sit and listen to other people talk, and they bring in experts around the city, but we don't have opportunities to sit and share ideas within each other and figure out best practices and what works in our city and how to work on those things together. We also don't, in the same process of evaluating what works, is be able to sit and honestly and openly talk about what's not working. I think each and every one of us could point to things that say that is not working. For example, the voucher system in Dallas, right? We give out all these vouchers. It's kind of like the community chest card you get when you play Monopoly. And it's great, but there's no housing for those vouchers. And most of the people that get vouchers that are homeless will lose their housing. We did a survey with 275 individuals in Tent City and found that over a third of them had already been in housing and lost it. And so where we see holes in the armor and chinks, right, where we have weaknesses, I don't think we come together and collaborate enough on where some of those, I wouldn't say failures are, because every organization in town is working their tail off, but where we see places for improvement. And yes, we need more money. The organizations in town, especially the nonprofits, part of all of our jobs as directors of our organization is to fundraise. And if we didn't have to do that, we could spend more time doing the programmatic things that we love to do. And I think many of the nonprofits right now are struggling on trying to figure out how to pay the bills. Our staff, we have 10 staff members, and as I mentioned earlier, we're serving 8,500 folks, so we're outnumbered 850 to 1. So you just do the math. I think every organization in the city could use more money.
Does anyone else want to chime in on sort of the small scale, what we can do to sort of improve the homeless response?
I agree with Wayne that we've got to invest in the systems that work, and I think that Daniel and Bob are both right that we have a homeless response system that in its current state is working well enough, but there's clearly not enough capacity to meet demand, and so we need more street outreach to engage the individuals to try to get them into shelter. We need more immediate, it doesn't have to be permanent, but immediate shelter solutions that are low barrier to help get these folks into shelter. And at the end of the day, this all comes down to housing, folks. I mean, there's just not enough housing in this city that's affordable, whether it's housing first or not. We just need housing. And the tent city and the million tent cities that are going to come after this, they are going to continue to pop up around our city until we address this housing issue. And we cannot rely on the federal government to fix what's wrong with our local community. We have to have local community investment from the people that live here to our city council and our county and the state. And it's not until we have all the buy-in until we're actually going to see change in our city.
So I'll parlay that into the second part of my question is like big picture. I mean, you have sort of a broken mental health care system. You have rampant poverty. You have all these structural factors that we as a city can only do so much about. But I mean, what steps can Dallas take to at least begin to address or ameliorate some of those problems? And Blake, I'll kick it back to you because that was a good point on housing. So,
well, the first thing we can do is push our governor to expand Medicaid. So, if we could expand Medicaid, we could access an incredible amount of behavioral health dollars that not only can be used to address immediate crises, but they also can be used for dollars for supportive housing, which, as we know, HUD doesn't pay for the supports of supportive housing. So, but Medicaid can. So, there's a huge untapped revenue source that we could one day tackle.
Okay. Anyone else want to chime in?
Well, one thing I wanted to mention was most cities have some level of a respite program. So what I'm seeing is an extraordinary amount of medical and health conditions that honestly, sometimes I get frustrated, right? Because I feel like shelters are expected to be a hospital. They're expected to be, another jail for people that have been, for whatever reason, the jails are full, and so they send people out, and then we're expected to make sure that we have shelter beds for those folks. And we can be really good at what we do, but we can't be everything to everybody with the limited budgets that we have. And so I think that there needs to be a program in Dallas that provides the type of support that people medically need, because I have hospitals all the time, and I know the hospital social workers are doing their best, but the reality is I get taxi cabs where people drop folks off, and they've got colostomy bags, and they've got all kinds of issues going on, and somehow we've got no medical funding at all, no nurses or doctors on staff, and yet we're supposed to be able to provide, and then we're scrutinized when we have a 911 call with an ambulance because somebody had a seizure or some other issue. It's we can't have it both ways. If we see that there's a problem, we need to decide, okay, we're going to tackle this, we're going to fund it. Hospitals are going to help pay for a program that provides people with a respite bed. Instead of spending $30,000 for another night in the hospital, you get that $30,000 and you put it into someone being able to be housed for 3 to 6 months and actually have the support that they need. There's some common sense stuff that can happen, but it's really about political will and people coming to the table and say we're willing to do things differently. And it takes everybody, and it can't just be the shelters and the outreach programs. It takes the community, the hospitals, the housing providers. Everyone's really got to come together for it.
Can I add to that real quick?
Yeah, please, yeah.
I just want to highlight again what Blake was saying. For every dollar we spend on housing, it's going to require so many more dollars for support services, right? So when someone's in one of the programs of one of the shelters in town, they get a lot of great support services. When they get out of housing, they get a roof. And sometimes those support services don't exist. And so we need to be able to fund in this city support services for those individuals that get into housing, especially, of course, the mental health issues. I mean, if we pick somebody up on the street who's having a psychotic breakdown, we spend $1.5 billion on Parkland, and there's only 12 beds there for mental health, right? And we've got to sit with someone through Parkland ER to get them to the psych ER, because there is no psych ER in Dallas. And now that Timberlawn's closed, we've got to go down to Dallas Behavioral Health Care. It's as far out of Dallas. There's a lack of mental health resources, and even for those folks in and out of the shelters, Daniel talks about people in colostomy bags at their doorstep. We find them under bridges, with zippers from being open heart surgery and are stuck outside because there's not enough support services for individuals inside the shelters and, more important, those outside the shelters. I mean, our population is growing every day. Our poverty rate, unfortunately, is growing every day. You mix those two things together, we're going to continue to have more homeless individuals than we want to see in Dallas.
So in terms of the individuals, the people here in this room who obviously care enough to show up, what advice would you give to people like that who want to see things work better, who want to see change? I mean, is it a matter? I mean, obviously, you'd probably all enjoy some donations, but I mean, is it a matter of just voting? Is it a matter of what impact can these individuals have?
Go ahead, Bob. One thing I would say is overarching a theme that's coming out tonight is a one size does not fit all. It just doesn't. So we have to be very careful when you put a number of minds of people in the same room saying that the goal is for them to fix the problem, because if they expect it to be fixed by everybody embracing one thing, for example, right now, one thing that's pushed very strongly is housing first. I believe in getting housing for homeless people. I do not embrace housing first. Homeless people used to have a home. If we don't find out why they lost that one and we give them another one, they're very likely to lose it. I understand that the mindset is wrapping services around that when you put them in housing. We have many people that come to our shelters who are not ready to take a key and be your neighbor. I think you have every right to say, why can't some of their issues get fixed before you put them next door to me? And if a person's in an apartment complex and they're in an apartment where they're paying $750 a month to stay there and working 2 jobs to make it, and here comes someone that we put through permanent supportive housing who's asked to pay 1/3 of their $200 a month that they make, and they're doing little or nothing for a work ethic, you might have a real issue there, neighbor to neighbor. So from our perspective at Dallas Life, we like to fix and work on the issues that caused the homelessness. I see homelessness as a condition in need of recovery. I personally do not believe we will ever end homelessness. Why? Because someone way before me said, the poor will always be with you. So I see that as a scriptural truth. I don't think that it's responsibility of the government. I think it's a responsibility of the church, who's dropped the ball and needs to be engaged more. But I believe a one size does not fit all. And I, for one, on the Homeless Coalition, will not swallow a one size fits all at all. It's not the answer.
Does anyone want to stick up for Housing First? Daniel or Blake?
Do we want to respond to Housing First?
Yeah, I mean, give a philosophical justification for Housing First. I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, Housing First does work. We see it in communities across the country that have adopted and implemented a Housing First model, but it only works when you have the right supports wrapped around somebody. And I agree wholeheartedly with Bob. I don't agree in a one-size-fits-all, and not every person is ready to take that key and go. But for those that are, Housing First needs to be in the menu of services that we provide to folks. And, for me, I think my experience, because I've worked in Housing First communities before when I was in Santa Monica, and caseloads were 1 to 10, because we were wrapping ourselves around these folks to make sure that they were successful in their housing. But I don't know how productive it is for us to be having a Housing First conversation when we are so far away. I mean, we are years away from being able to implement a Housing First model, given the number of sheer folks experiencing homelessness living on the streets in our shelters at this moment.
But it is what we're being bombarded with in media and in meetings. And if it worked, there would be no community people coming to say it's broken. So I totally do agree that the one size the one size doesn't fit all. But if all we're saying is we need more money, more housing, more money for more housing, and we're all agreeing that people graduate from our programs and they're getting a voucher that's good for 7 months. If you're a landlord and you see one guy come who used to be homeless that's got a voucher that will pay his rent for 7 months, and you have another person over here willing to sign on for 12 months, who are you going to rent to? You're not going to rent to the guy that used to be homeless, even though you believe they're trying to put their life back together. So there's a problem with it. The disconnect is placing the people in. I have 37,000 unduplicated names, and I'll be 100% open with you. That's my concern about HMIS. Before I give them 37,000 names with which they go to Austin and they ask for more permanent supportive housing, to come here and the people that go through a 10-month program with me don't get that housing because someone flies through 30 days with no crack cocaine, and they suck up those apartments really quick through that nonprofit. I say, whoa, 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 whoa. I'm not going to use my numbers to help bring more apartments here if they're going to get snatched up by people that I don't think got fixed yet. That's my issue.
So clearly there's lots of room for debate and discussion, which will happen in the coming weeks. But one final question for you guys, then we'll open it up for questions from the audience. But like my read of sort of what happened in Dallas when it comes to homelessness was about 10 years ago. There was a crisis, sort of, tent city-esque. It wasn't a tent city, but there was a crisis. Everyone sort of woke up and was like, wow, there's a humongous homelessness problem. We need to do something about it. There was a task force. They built the bridge. And then, not crickets, but I mean, there hasn't been like an ongoing conversation for the past 10 years. It's only that tent city sparked it. How do we sustain attention on the issue and sort of keep the conversation going in sort of a productive way that leads to solutions? I'll just throw that out there.
Well, I think, part of what happened when the bridge opened, and then in the several years following that, there was a healthy amount of permanent supportive housing that got developed in our city. And so we were starting to see a positive response and movement of the homelessness, I can't think of the word, but anyway, pendulum. And perhaps when you start seeing that, it just kind of drops in the background. But I think that's what's happened, kind of history repeating itself, because we were here in the 90s too with the same issue. I was in high school, but I still remember. And I just totally gave my age. But I think we have to stay focused. You mentioned Will. You can't just say, oh, we've got 300 permanent supportive housing vouchers, let's quit and move on. It's got to be 300 year after year after year after year after year to keep up with population growth, poverty growth, homelessness growth. So anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, so she was talking about the population growth and issues like that. What's interesting is that when I grew up in Dallas, anything north of basically 635 Richardson, was maybe about as far as it went. After that, it's basically grassland. Plano didn't even really exist, until I became to be in my teens. And so now we look at it, and it's McKinney, it's Frisco, it's Prosper, and we get larger and larger as a city. Well, say you take an average percentage of people who are homeless in a community. You want to look at that, and you want to see how the population has grown in DFW. Then we basically, it's no different than streets and bridges. We basically said we're going to increase population growth and we're not going to invest in infrastructure. It's the same general concept, because there's been no new shelter beds since 2008 when the bridge opened. And even then, so they've got 250 beds. I know you've got 600, I've got 411. He mentioned he's got 500. We're still a long way away from being able to shelter everybody that needs it. So I just want to make sure we made that point.
Yeah.
Okay.
And also, you made the point that homelessness is now a conversation. The four of us are in that conversation every day and have for years. It's nice to see people discussing the issue. I think what's challenging is for people to discuss the issue in a way that actually speaks with some wisdom And I think it's great. You asked what people can do, right? I think coming here is something people can do. I also would encourage you to go, if you haven't already, go volunteer at one of the organizations in town so you can see what's going on day to day. And volunteer with a few of them. Show up under a bridge and sit and bring a Coke and sit down and have a drink with a guy that's under there. Spend some time with someone listening to their story. I think you gain a lot more wisdom by closing your mouth and opening your ears and listen to some of the challenges that are going on the streets. You know, as Daniel said, as our population has grown, our infrastructure has really stayed the same. But I also want to applaud him as well. Austin Street added 100 beds in response to Tent City since he's taken over there as their director. And I think they've made some of the biggest dent in the issues at their exact facility just in response to the need. And I think that should be applauded.
Thanks, Wayne. And I wanted to mention that even though we did that, we still saw triple the number of turnaways that we did at the end of the day. So there's a lot of people that are resistant to shelter, but there's also a lot of people that would access shelter if there were enough beds available, and there simply are not. I'm telling you, when I go to the door at the end of the day, and I've done this a handful of times in the past couple of weeks and said, I'm sorry guys, we're completely full, we can get no more, and people beg me. They're like, can you take me, they're like, I don't care, I don't need a mat, I don't need a bed, just stick me on the floor somewhere where I'm not gonna freeze to death or burn up or, get beaten up in the middle of the night, and there's simply not the space for it.
I have 100+ available beds every day, but I have rules. They have to abide by it. So if he says he'll go anywhere, send them to me.
Well, and I'm speaking to the population of people that we serve, right? And I certainly recognize that not every one of the folks that we serve, may be willing to follow some of those rules. And that's why I think a beautiful system is people that say, hey, this is what I do really well, and that's what I'm going to do. And so we need to recognize the strengths in one another and say, hey, Bob, I love the fact that you have a lot of recovery-oriented services. To the people that, are willing to engage in that level of recovery, I need to make sure those go to you, right? And the people that, that may not be willing to engage in that amount of recovery, specifically towards addiction, maybe there's another space better utilized, for those folks. And we need to make sure beds are available in those locations in order so that can happen, so that they're not on the street.
Yeah. Well, I guess let's give a round of applause for the panelists up here. These are the people on the ground who are doing the really hard work. And now we'll open it up for questions. Tanya, are we gonna pass the mic around or? Okay. I think Tanya's gonna grab the mic and bring it around. 717. So if you would, just state your name and then ask your question.
Hi. Hello, can you hear me? Hi, my name is Isha, and I am currently homeless. And I've been a resident at all 3 shelters and received services from our colony. What I have is not really a question, it's more of a statement, coming from a homeless perspective. And as I stated, I have stayed at all 3 of your shelters and received services from you, sir, from your organization. The best experience I have had has been from our calling. And that is because our calling treated me like a person, going through an experience, not an experience going through a person. And I think a lot of the time we forget that regardless of what an individual is going through, they are an individual. You have people that are on drugs because of whatever situation or circumstance, and they could have been professors, doctors, police officers, lawyers. They came from families that loved them, that cared, that whatever circumstance happened, could have been medical, it could have been a mental breakdown because of the lack of insurance or services that would pay for that care. What I experienced that hurt so much was the lack of respect from your staff in seeing that they did not see Isha going through a situation. I lost my home behind a divorce because my husband chose to run off and take our money right along with him. And at the time I was going into school, I was not working, and I had a daughter and a son to take care of. So I struggled to pay for an $80,000 in-debt house in need of repair. I had to sell it, making barely $2,000. Most of what I had was in child support, and I had to pay that at Dallas Life. So I had no money. Another thing, that issue is the lack of resource sharing. What you all need to understand is your greatest resource are the people you serve. we have access to more knowledge from the person sleeping next to us than we do the case managers that we see every day. And that's incorrect. One of the major issues I had, and I understand, please understand, I'm not coming from a nitpicking. This is the experience that I've endured, okay? When I first came to Dallas, I came and stayed at Dallas Life. And the bulk of the child support that I received, I paid to stay at your shelter. But I could not get a referral to child care so that I could look for a job. And that was just really hurtful because I can't take my child to a job interview. The only way I got the resource to child care was to go outside of the shelter. I should not have had to do that. At Salvation Army, I didn't find out Salvation Army had services that I could acquire until I went to Stupot. So, you know, look beyond our situation. We're people just like you. We don't want to be where we are, regardless of whether we're in a mental health state, whether we're addicted to drugs, whether we go through a rehab. And I understand you have a 90% success rate. How many relapses out of that 90% have you had?
We do monitor that.
You know, and I understand. It's not easy.
Go ahead, sure.
But we're people too. And people that serve people need to be reminded that's the person you're dealing with.
You're right, Isha.
Sure.
Hands down.
Where are you staying now?
I will not disclose that
But
information.
you have a place to stay?
Yes, I do.
That's good.
Good for you.
That's important, that you have a place to stay. That's good. That's good. That's good. That's good.
My name is Ewing Mosley, and I've lived in this city for well over 82 years, and my family for over 150. My family were original founders of Austin Street Shelter. Kent City never should have existed. There is a law spelled L-A-W that you cannot sleep in public. And our city fathers have allowed people to sleep in public, which they handcuffed our police officers. They could not arrest people for sleeping in public. If I were to sleep in public, I would be taken to jail.
So do you have a question for the panel about how we can respond to that?
I think that we need to have better facilities. Originally, we should never have built the bridge. We should have housed the people at the Dallas Naval Air Station where there are barracks and there are medical facilities, but our city fathers did not exist. Fortunately, tonight, we have one of our city fathers who is functional in attendance. The rest of them couldn't have cared less. And I ask you to applaud Adam because he is the best. And thank you, panel. You all are incredible. God bless you.
So I'll throw that out to you guys because it got a lot of discussion. Michael S. here in the audience, he floated the proposal for Dignity Field to have the services at the Naval Air Station. What Daniel? What do you what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that's a workable solution? The way it was formulated.
First off, just want to thank you for painting me in the corner in front of my friend Michael S. Yeah, okay, I'll speak from the heart. So Michael he's an entrepreneur, and he's a brilliant idea guy. Okay, so this is what he does for a living, is he comes up with brilliant ideas. So, but the reality is with homelessness, the devil's always in the details. It's always in management. And you could talk about that, whether you're talking about cottages, which I think will be really successful. You could talk about whether it's Austin Street or Dallas Life or, Salvation Army. It's in the way that you do what you do is even more important than what you do, which is why, like, one of the metrics that I'm trying to evaluate folks by is how they're engaging with folks. I've let several people go within the past 2 weeks because they have not been kind enough to the guests that stay at Austin Street. So trust me, it's really important in how we treat people. And I think the answer to your question about whether or not that project would ever work all depends upon how it will be run and managed, what type of support will be there, will the money be there for it. Personally, I'm not confident that the money will be there. So I'm not sure that it's actually something that we can pull the trigger on. But as a concept, sure, it's a good idea in the sense you have a lot of people housed. I'm a little worried about the tent encampment part of it, right? I think the sort of progressive up, part of it. There's some maybe meat to that. So.
Okay.
Sometimes it's just starting the conversation.
Right. And I love
Other-
Michael.
Other,
I don't like to hold the microphone because I get nervous and start shaking. And so I'm Ricky Red. Some of you know me. I'm on the board of directors of the Metro Dallas Homeless Alliance and serve on several committees. First of all, before I get to my question, I'd like to say hello to Bill Thompson. A lot of people have been praying for you, Bill.
Oh, Bill, you should be up here.
So it's good to see you. One of the things I noticed y'all talked about is you talked about housing. Y'all agree on that? We need more housing, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And the unsheltered have mental problems. Okay, now I'm going to say a dirty word. For some reason, nobody seems to want to think about this as part of the solution. And that is group homes. Okay, nobody mentioned up there when you were talking anything about group homes. Okay, I asked Dave Hogan, about the percentage of people that are unsheltered that have mental problems to the degree that they just simply cannot have their own place. And he said it was somewhere between 50 and 60%. So what is the solution? Group homes. And who pays for the group home? They pay for it themselves out of their check. Okay, it doesn't cost anybody anything. So my question is, how do we improve the group homes in the city of Dallas so that people will have a nice place to stay, that will help them with their medication, help them with cooking food for them, and washing clothes, and providing social service activities? And why is it that the city, and I know the city is trying to do a good job. Connie Reese, who is over that they're trying to turn things around, but there needs to be more done because the group home situation in Dallas is bad.
Okay,
Okay,
so let's toss that out there.
Yeah, I
Group
mean, I
homes.
think group homes is definitely part of the solution. I mean, as, talk about that one-size-fits-all approach, that is definitely one of the many resources that we need to utilize. And I do have to, give a shout-out to Janie Metzinger and all the work that she's been doing to improve the group home, or the boarding home, situation, and to get them regulated within the city. And so I do applaud her and the city's efforts to do that. And I think they have made great strides. I think there's still a ways to go. And I think that's just, again, part of the community will and investment in making that happen.
Yeah, that should be on the table for discussion, group
Yeah,
homes.
for
We
sure.
found that our senior citizens were a little slower to graduate from our program out of fear. They felt that when they finished the 10-month program and they were living on a limited income, that then when they would leave, people would take advantage of them. So what we did was, we had our largest rooms where we put 4 and 5 and 6 seniors of the same sex together. So by the time they left, we said, 2 or 3 of you have gotten to be good friends, and if you would pool your resources and go get a place, you'd have more residual income left over at the end of the month. So we kind of pushed that.
Good point, Ricky.
So,
Yes.
Ricky, real quick, I've visited lots of group homes because we refer people to lots of places. Some of them are nice places. Some of them I wouldn't send an enemy to. Some of them are filthy and just disgusting. And I'm so glad that the city is making some great strides in regulating those and testing them and validating what they're doing there. But you also mentioned those people with severe mental health issues and them being able to pay for group homes out of their checks. We have a huge problem with people that get a check that can't find a payee, and we don't have adequate payee services in Dallas. And a lot of the payees are really just loan sharks, people taking individuals' money. And there's a huge need in this city for a payee service that has accountability that would help fund some of those opportunities.
Right.
Robert Ceccarelli. Sure, some people see me in Dallas Morning News, chronicling homeless. This is for Blake, also from Madrano, and Larry James and Marva Jones. Blake, we talked earlier, and I'm wondering, because I spoke in front of City Council, Madrano will tell you this, but I need help. Are you willing? And those other 3 people, Larry James, Marva Jones, and Marva Jones, Larry James, and you. Are you willing to speak in front of City Council, County Commissioners, and the Housing Committee about your program? I'm very critical. The program has the rapid rehousing, $360 a month, Medrano. Larry James has it $260 a month. It's in between the shelters and permanent supportive housing where they can get housing before they get their permanent supportive housing. Are you willing to do this and share your message and how successful it is? I wish you could hope you can do it, because if not, it's not going to be passed along, because I do this by myself, and I can't do it by myself. I need your help.
Yeah. I'm willing to have a conversation. I'll commit to that, starting the conversation with our council member and with Larry, and I already told Larry that you wanted to have us get together, so let's start with the conversation and take it from there. Thanks for bringing it forward.
Hi, I'm William Johnson. I'm a person of Austin Street Shelter, and there are programs at Austin Street Shelter that has helped me with my issues that I had as far as my homeless. But the problem that I see now, there's not funds. Austin Street Shelter has reached out to myself and other clients. There's just not funds there for that. What is their plan to do at this point?
Increasing funding.
Yeah, so funding is an issue. You know, in fact, you know, Austin Street a couple of years ago was considering making dramatic changes, even to the point of shutting down. Just because it was really difficult to access the private dollars that were needed to do that. So a couple things have changed since then. We've experienced an increased community support. We were also blessed to be a part of the Continuum, the Healthy Community Collaborative, which was a state appropriation. So for the first time, we received a little bit of government funds. It's still, you know, less than 10% of our overall income, but it's been hugely impactful because it's helped double our case management size. You know, at one point in time, you know, Austin Street was a place where people would come in from off the street. They call it the walk-in. They just go to sleep, and that was basically all that happened there. You know, now we're at a place where we're able to case manage, you know, about a third, maybe to almost a half of the people that come in. So we still have a long way to go, but we're beginning to make progress because of the support. So yeah, the funds is a massive issue. You know, we have one of the lowest cost per beds. Several folks here are some of the lowest. I mean, I know you know, UGM has a very low cost per bed. You know, there's a lot, and I know Dallas Life isn't too far from that. So I think we're all, you know, trying to do as much as we can, and every program is different, so you can't all compare apples to apples. But you know, still, you know, we operate what we do on basically $14 per bed, so that's pretty inexpensive.
My name is James Hickey, and first I want to say thank you, Daniel. I've reached the end of my journey, and 2 weeks I get the housing, and I get the disability.
Mm-hmm.
It's all done.
Love you, James. Love you, James.
And this question is for Mr. Sweeney up here. You made a comment about talking to people about why they would not rather be in your shelter than under a bridge. I can't answer that. When I was there, I was not allowed to go to the church of my choice. The senior overcomers, disabled people, even ones with one leg, if they missed a class or missed a minute, and it was all religion classes, they were forced to sleep on a mat downstairs in the cold. And I remember it very well. And I would have been one of those people who would have rather slept under a bridge until I found Austin Street Shelter.
So Bob,
I too remember your stay. And there's lots of things about your stay that we won't get into in front of those. It's perfectly fine that you have that view. You had choices at that time to not enter that program. It was the program you entered of choice. You signed on to a program that had specific religious expectations to it, and those are the rules you had to follow to be in that program of your choice.
Okay. Next question.
Hello, how you doing? My name is Minister Dominique Alexander, President and founder of the Next Generation Action Network. First off, I want to thank the lady who, her spirit of humility allowed us to hear that testimony of her interactions. I want to thank her too also. I heard a recap, and my question is what I heard on the panel. Throughout the last 20 years of my life, I have saw where our government have marginalized, and a lot of these people, for as the choices of our government has left them homeless, a lot of the bailouts, the housing bailouts that never came to the consumers that lost their homes being stuck in homeless. I heard one of the things, and it kind of weirded me out. I want to hear the panel say one thing. Who do you think is responsible for getting these people who have been marginalized back into society? Is it we the people or the government that has created the policies? I want to hear that.
So yeah, Wayne, I'll let you take this one. So talk about, I mean, is it the government's responsibility? Is it private organizations, religious groups' responsibility? Where's that balance?
Well, his question was it the government or was it the people? And if we're a government of the people, by the people, for the people, then the government is the people, theoretically, right? But obviously things happen in the government that a lot of people turn around and go, what? What just happened there? Your question is it the government or is it these nonprofits? And I think the nonprofits stand in the gap between the services the government is able to perform and the services that are often needed, right? You know, I believe it's the church's responsibility, and a lot of the failures we see is because of the failure of the church to get up and leave the sanctuary and hit the streets, right? And so I think there's a gap between the services we need, the services we want, the services the government can afford. You know, if we were to say the government should pay for more housing and give more money to all the shelters in town and provide more services, what services are we going to cut to pay for that, right? So there's only, you know, so many pieces in the pie, and there's not enough to go around. But I think all of us stand in that gap between what the services the government can afford to provide. And yes, there's a lot of history in our country that we all are shameful of. There's a lot of things that have marginalized lots of people. You just look at the recidivism rates in the prison system and our judicial system and all the mess that leads to more and more people being homeless. And you know, we are going to have to stand, in my opinion, in front of God, but even a little bit more closer to that, we're going to stand in front of our children and ask them to forgive us for the nation that we're handing to them because of that.
Okay.
Good evening, panel. My name is Dean Jones, and I am a survivor of over 20 years of homelessness. I've been in all your programs, and what I realized is that once I went back to the VA for the 4th time, they finally diagnosed me as being bipolar depressant, and they were able to treat that and give me a place to stay in the meantime to where my mind could somewhat start functioning again. When I realized with the hard drugs, you lose your morals and values. So after a while, dressing didn't matter, living the streets and stuff didn't matter, and it put a lot of pressure on y'all because I was in and out and stuff like that. But like I was telling her, I really came to thank y'all for putting up with me. And you know,
thanks for putting up with us.
And for the last 4 years of my sobriety, I've been, I like what the gentleman to my right said in the green, that I've been giving back. I have a little clothing line where I raise money. I raised over $6,000 within this year through GoFundMe, through the Dallas International, for the Dallas International Street Church. But I truly believe that addicts can help other addicts, and if y'all provide the facility and work with us, we can work with each other because we know, we can sense when another one of us is about to be mentally unstable and go back out and use and stuff like that. And I'm not saying everyone is a drug addict, but for us that are recovering from it, for all of us, I would just like to say thank you.
Hi guys, my name's Linda Garner. I'm a resident of the Cedars. I've met Wayne before. I haven't met the rest of the panel. But Isha and Mr. Jones, thank y'all for speaking because you guys represent the different types of homeless persons that we deal with, which I think needs to be distinguished because what I deal with in the Cedars is a little bit different type of person than maybe Isha. Isha wouldn't be walking in my neighborhood. So And Wayne, I would like to take your offer to sit under an underpass and maybe have a Coke with some persons who are unsheltered, but I do that in my front yard. So my concern is when you speak about wanting and needing more funding, does that mean, because I live near Austin Street and Dallas Life and the bridge and multiple other places that sort of concentrate the homeless districts and the criminal activity into my neighborhood. When you say you need funding, does that mean expanding? And where does that funding come from? I know a lot of donations, but is the county helping in any way? Where do you feel that the county needs to be in this? And so my question, I guess, is twofold here.
Okay. I have adequate beds and leftovers, so we're not in any way looking to expand. I take no government or city dollars. We raise all of our $3 million a year from our individual donors, churches, foundations, corporations, and special events.
So,
do you have a comment on where the county should be in this? I know individually, or your institution doesn't take county money.
I would say when you get governmental involvement, there's concern that some Christian organizations get all nervous thinking it means there go all the crosses. I don't think that's the case. I think there are some government dollars out there based on the programs that are being offered. We partner with the veterans as well, so there are things like that. I believe that every homeless person that comes is going to have some specific individual needs. So as we focus on that, I don't think there's anything wrong with going after some funding for that. But I think that the cities are stretched, the budgets are stretched, just like your dollars are stretched. And so there are people getting marginalized. This middle class is getting smaller, and the poverty is increasing, and we're going to have to do something.
So, do you want us all to respond to that, or just Bob?
Yeah, I mean, especially with the expanding, the
Yeah.
funding, is it going to expand your services?
Yeah,
and
so,
therefore make my,
Yeah.
existence a little bit more difficult?
Sure.
It really does. I'm not going to lie.
Sure. It does.
But I don't
Sure it
deal
does.
with, the divorced housewife, who's struggling. I mean, I see the person at the end of their rope.
Yeah.
And it's, I'm spraying vomit off my sidewalk and
Oh, yeah.
feces off the buildings, and I'm getting constantly yelled at. Thankfully, my house is known as the Doberman house, so I take pride in that. For having
So-
a Doberman, but
So Danielle, you wanna tackle that?
Yeah, so I'll start with what's happened over the past year. So when I became the executive director for Austin Street maybe 13 months ago, they had maybe an average of 325 people there per evening. So we've already expanded to 411. We did that without asking for government dollars at the time. What ended up happening to us is that there was I think another agency or something that had an appropriation that wasn't able to use it for some reason. I don't know the details on that. That was someone brought that to us and said, hey, that they basically actually came to us and said, will you please spend this money, because we don't have another program and we needed it at the time. So we of the $2.2 million that Austin runs on every year. For all of our operations, $2 million of that is privately raised, and basically $227,000 is the state appropriation. So that's where we currently sit. When we're asking for more dollars, I'm gonna have to be honest with you, it's both and, right? So I'm sitting on a piece of property that had not been touched in over 20 years. Do you know what the life of air conditioning unit is? I happen to do, because I've replaced about 12 of them since I've started. And so, it's both sides of this. So now, if we want it, we can talk about expansion. I've got no room in my current facility to expand beds. Now, with additional dollars raised, could we expand into the property, next to us? Where, yeah, we could do that. That's a possibility. That's a much longer conversation. I need to make sure that the city or the county is going to support an effort like that. But it's definitely something that's worth to be considered, whether it's private or government. It's all coming from you, regardless of which way that it's coming. So anyway, just let me tell you that I hear you with your frustrations and challenges. I can tell you, as someone who, had someone who's homeless move into my home. I've done it like 3 different times throughout my life, and not currently doing it. But I've had folks that I've worked with for a long time with all the sort of defecation issues that you're experiencing. I hear the frustration and challenges that you face, and I want to work with you to try to find ways to resolve that. One of the things we're currently focused on right now is if we can decrease that. So the average length of stay when I got there was 54 days. So if we're able to decrease that from 54 down to 25, and those people are going in to housing and they're able to remain in housing, then we can serve twice as many people by having just another case manager as opposed to doing it by adding another bed. And I can add more beds, but it's not necessarily going to solve your issue.
I don't want more beds in my
Right,
area.
exactly.
Satellite.
Beds be somewhere else, yeah.
Where I think the concentration is what's creating a negative environment.
Yeah.
All trying to cope
And-
with ecosystem.
And I agree with you. If you look at what's happened in LA, it's, Skid Row, basically, they're now trying to, they, at one point in time, they said, let's all have it all together so we can coordinate well. And now they're saying, oh, no, that was a mistake. We need to diverse. So now they're looking at going out. So we need to make sure we don't make the mistakes that they made early on, here today. The flip side of that is, when you talk about what can you do, here's some things you can do. You can go listen to your homeless neighbor and ask them questions and learn from them. You can also talk to your community to make sure that when there becomes a program in your neighborhood for a housing project, that your people that say, we believe in giving people a second chance if they have the adequate support that they need. Because I'm telling you, I know a place down the street from where I live. None of my neighbors know about it. None of them complain about it. And, they're able to house lots of people who were formerly homeless. And so it doesn't always have to be, this, we talk about, it's as if we're moving the worst of the worst into your backyard. In your current situation, you're dealing with that. But when we're talking about housing projects spread throughout the city, it doesn't have to be that way. Sorry, It's a little bit of a soapbox.
No, that's fine. Next question.
My name is Stephen Woolard. I'm a resident of downtown. Good news, I'm open to new ideas, and I have political will in spades. And my political will is that there be no more shelter beds in districts 2, 7, or 14 until the rest of the city takes on some of that load. All that's happening now is that everything is being concentrated in the city core, and I see my neighbors here. They deal with it every day. I've been to her house. I've been to his house. I've been to her house. I watch what's happening there. Concentrating and building more shelters in the city is not working. We're $100 million in since the bridge opened, and the homeless problem is worse than ever. So I would like any of you on the panel to tell me why I, as a citizen of Dallas, would pick up the phone tomorrow morning and call Councilman Medrano and say, hey, I got this great idea. Let's pour a bunch more money into the failed policies that the homeless industrial complex has brought us so far. Thank you.
So should there be shelters elsewhere in the city of Dallas? I mean, you mentioned concentrations of encampments, by I-20 or 635 or whatever.
The two largest shelters are not downtown. What are those two largest shelters in town? Anybody know?
UGM, Salvation Army.
UGM, Salvation Army. Those are the two biggest shelters in town. Two of them together by far outweigh anybody in size, number of beds, and square footage and all the other stuff that you can measure. Dallas needs more shelter beds, period. It's going to be somewhere in our future to add more shelter beds. We have about 2,500 shelter beds total across the city spectrum. Okay, 725 at UGM. You have about 600, including your court-ordered programs at Salvation Army. 380 is the average stay at Dallas Life. They have 350. You guys are 411 beds, and there's 250 at the Bridge. And then we got a couple of smaller places that have between 20 and 60 beds. There's about 5 of those, a couple of domestic violence centers. So we're about 2,500 shelter beds. Now, nobody asked this question, but how many people experience homelessness every year in Dallas? Well, Parkland's mobile medical clinic saw over 10,000 clients last year that self-identified as homeless. But that's just the one that the clinic saw. That doesn't count Parkland, the mothership. It doesn't count Baylor, Presby, any of the other hospitals in town. So we obviously have this delta between the number of people that need services and the number of places for them to go. And I agree, whoever said earlier, that there are laws that criminalize homelessness, sleeping outside. But then we ask the question, where are they going to sleep? There's not enough beds in the shelters. There's not enough bridges to sleep under. We have this huge void where we need to fill it. And nobody wants it in their backyard. And I agree, centralizing those, another service provider downtown that would sleep more people is probably not the best idea. But we need to find a place to put them. And I've actually been out to the airfield. Anybody else that been out there to the airfield, drove around it was kind of fun. I felt like I'm about to take off and launch, driving down that runway there. Providing services in that remote location is going to be probably as challenging as raising the money for it, right? Because any one of these organizations wouldn't be what they are without all the services that come in there, like Parkland and MetroCare and all those service providers as well. But there needs to be a place, and that may be the place, who knows, but there needs to be a place for additional beds somewhere in this city. Our population is growing, and as Daniel pointed out, our bed count has not. And those two things don't add up.
Hey, Wayne, what's the front door to the Union Gospel Mission? How do you get in there?
What?
You have to go where?
No, I know where. The men's program picks up at the bridge, yeah. And they do that for a couple of reasons. The women's program on Cass, or the other one, is directly to the door of those facilities.
Why do you suppose that is?
Well, it's
Bill's here. Maybe
Bill, you want to respond to that? He's the director. Bill Thompson has been the director of Union Gospel Mission since 1920.
Patriarch in Dallas.
No, he's actually been working longer with the homeless than anybody here.
Well, the answer to the question is there are requirements even when you move into a remote area of the city that is based upon zoning. So we had to get spot zoning in order to move into an industrial area that's about 5 miles north of the city. We had to agree with the neighborhood association there that we would not take walk-up, that we would have to transport the people in and transport them out. And so that is the reason that you don't know the address to the door, is because the bus has to come there to bring the people that are staying for the night.
So there's city and political reasons behind that.
No, I understand. But the population, my point was, the population that goes to UGM is at the bridge downtown.
Yes.
Even though the beds are elsewhere, they're here downtown.
Yeah.
That was my point.
That's
Yeah.
Okay.
So about half of their beds are picked up downtown.
We got about 10 minutes left, so
Okay,
we're
10 minutes.
going to
Name,
try to go through these
quick
questions
question.
quickly.
Otherwise, we're not going to get through the rest of the people. So,
Thank you all. My name is Deborah Carr, and I work for a nonprofit organization that has a transitional housing program for women, men, and families that have experienced domestic violence. I've been in Dallas for now about 3 years, and what I am seeing is, as we look at trying to identify solutions, I feel that it is a comprehensive approach that not only includes the church, but the community and corporations and everybody as a whole. And as I try to help my clients to access services, I find fragmentation, systems not working, from healthcare to mental health to wherever it is I'm trying to send my clients to get help. I applaud everyone for the conversation we're having, but are we doing more to engage landlords to help provide safe and affordable places for our clients to live, corporations who are looking for viable people to work, jobs, and what about safety? How do we continue to assure safety and security for everyone? Because all of us really want that.
So that's a really big question that's probably going to be touched on in some of the other conversations. Anyone want to take a quick stab?
Well, I'll just acknowledge that the Dallas Housing Authority has done a tremendous job over the last couple of months holding landlord fairs, engaging landlords and getting them reinvested and wanting to serve folks that have vouchers. And so they've done a great job and had a lot of success with that. And I agree, it takes a village. So we need the churches and the corporations and the individuals and the community and political will. So I agree with you there. I'm not sure what else to add about that. But.
I also would say I think it's healthy that communities extend their voice and let it be known. I sat and met with people on the Cedars neighborhood, gone to their meetings. They literally have told me what they like about what happens at Dallas Life. They've come and had lunch with us, and I've made a commitment to those in the Cedars. I'm not adding beds. I do think there needs to be a spreading out. I've walked the neighborhoods where you're facing those issues. We've gone down with Tanya and walked the neighborhood during the day and engaged with people. 1/3 of my staff were homeless and graduated from my program, and I hired them. So we have both formerly homeless and not that are working with us. So yeah, no more beds coming to Dallas Life.
Okay. Next question.
Hi, my name is Donna Lloyd, and I am a young lady that went to Austin Street 4 years ago. And I moved out and stayed like 8 months. And I was living in one of the worst rundown apartments complexes, and I was paying $7.85. And I had wood rats, possums, and raccoons running in my walls playing at night. My apartment caught on fire Christmas Day, but I had come back to Austin Street. They opened their loving arms and accepted me back. Now, since I've been at Austin Street, I got into a program that offers people on a fixed income as myself to buy a home. What Dallas needs to do, and I'm not talking about the shelters. I'm not talking about the city council. I'm talking about the city of Dallas mayor's office and everybody that's got clout and in charge. They need to stop building all of these apartments around here and raising the rent up so high where people cannot afford to live. Because there are a lot of us homeless people that have never had a drug addiction, an alcohol addiction. We've never been mental. We're just workers, and we end up having one paycheck, and it failed.
So I think pretty much everyone agrees on the panel that Dallas needs way more affordable housing. Is that? Yeah, and it's a big.
Yeah. Josh. My name is Joshua Hill. I'm the case manager for Sellos Harbor. One of the questions that I have for the panel is there any way that there could be a screening process implemented to make sure that the proper care and the proper recovery support goes to the right demographic of person? Because I get a lot of people that call me that, well, I'm 12-step oriented at my facility, that would probably prefer to go to a more faith-based, such as Dallas Life. And I lose a lot of people there because, well, I can't help you, and then they don't continue to try to seek services. Is there a way we could implement a screening and a co-facilitation of referring to back and forth? That way we catch these people and they get the help they need where they will respond to the help at. Not cookie cutter recovery, but encompassing everyone and their needs specifically.
So I think that speaks to better coordination.
We have to talk after.
Yeah, coordinated assessment. We need to do it.
What's currently happening to coordinate? Who coordinates and who is responsible for that?
Well, it's part of the problem because right now there's several different coordinating systems, right? I mean, the reality is, we do our, triage and folks coming to us. The bridge does their triage and folks coming to the bridge. I'm sure that Salvation Army has some level of assessment that's done. Sure. There's even, assessments that's done, with the Wayne Walker's, our calling team, just getting that demographic understanding who they're working with and reaching out to them. So, there does need to be a system. There's conversations around a large foundation that supported, an entity of Parkland that was created a software system to allow for us to share information and better coordinate. We're all looking forward to seeing that product delivered and to see if we can actually get everybody onto it and see that this thing can actually work. But until that time, it's going to be about me reaching out to you and you reaching out to me and us making sure that we're on the same page. That's why our caseworkers are going down to other shelters and to other agencies to make sure they're trained on the processes of different places.
Hi, my name is Robert Jackson. I wonder that is it because the funding, is it because, we have Tent City that's going on during the Laura Miller situation? Is that one of the reasons why we having a hard time getting funding by the city?
Anyone want to speak to the sort of, lack of political will to better fund the sort of homeless street outreach or shelter beds? Or
well,
whatever.
When you talk about Laura Miller, you talk about the city issue, and I think, am I right, the only shelter in the city that actually gets dollars from the city would be the Bridge?
That's right.
Is that right? So the Bridge is the only shelter in town that gets any city money. So when you talk about city issues, it's the only place that they're investing in right now.
Lisa Ledbetter, new resident downtown CBD. There isn't a person in this room that doesn't want to help somebody that wants to get help, right? There is a criminal virus that is underlying and taking advantage of those that are homeless. And I see it every day. I see the bullying, I see the drugs, I see the demeaning nature, I see the stronger and the weaker. In your opinion, what do you think is the first thing the community, the officers, the legal, the mayor's office, the councilman, that we can do, because you're there every day with them under the bridges, and I'm not, that we can do to separate and sift the wheat, to give those that really want a chance and a shot, a better shot? How do we get the crap out that's just preying on the whole system and bastardizing what we see as possibility?
Well, I want to make a comment to that, because there was a study that was done in California to evaluate how many folks that were homeless panhandled. The numbers they came up with were 4%. Now, I'm not sure what that percentage is here in Dallas, but I think, just like anywhere that you go, right, you've got folks, you've got great police officers, you've got police officers that, may not last very long in the police unit, right, because we have a good chief right now. But I would say that, when you're looking at homelessness, some of the problem is that the system is doing some things that are working. And what ends up happening is you have these encampments that are likely close to where you are, so the folks that are willing to access services are accessing them, except for the folks that, that aren't able to find shelter in a way that accommodates their lifestyle. So there's definitely that issue to be addressed. But I think that's what you're talking about, right? Is people are living.
I don't do shelters. I don't want help. I don't like rules. I go to a shelter and I have rules. I don't want rules. I'm a grown man. When I was a kid, I didn't want to go to school. I had to go to school.
Yeah.
So I'm asking, you're in the middle of the system. What do you think will separate that sheep from that goat?
Well, that's what we do, right? As when people come to us, we're evaluating, what we can do to help them. What's the best placement for them? Is there a possibility to engage someone and put them in a place that's going to work for them? So a lot of what you end up having, on the street are folks that are not going to engage in a way that's going to work for them. The problem is that what are you going to do with that person? Okay, because the jails and prisons are full, and they're not going to be able. So we have this issue internally, right? So we have folks who come to our door that we know are violent and aggressive. Now, we don't have any that are inside the building because they get weeded out really quickly. But folks that may come to the door that we don't allow in, we call the police. The police will take them. Maybe we'll do an APAL. Maybe we'll actually, they'll have a criminal activity they can charge. We know trespass people ourselves at Austin Street that we don't want, to be able to be there because they're unsafe for the rest of our population. But we need to separate an issue of homelessness with an issue of criminality, okay? Because it's not the same thing.
But they get intermixed because you see one with the other, and people have a position that's false because of that virus that runs through.
Right.
So there's a stereotype of these individuals that are causing the most problems. And, to just address the criminal aspect for a moment, we need to have more enforceable citations, some that are enhanceable. So like criminal trespass is not enhanceable. So if you've done it 20 times, you get the same, 24 hours at loose terror that you did the first time. But there is quite a bit of the homeless population that the crime is often fed by cash that's given out on the street. So, this is my personal opinion and conviction that I would beg you, please don't give out any money. I think it hurts people. Give them our little book, you install our app, that kind of fun stuff. But what we're trying to do is work with, because we work with undercover police officers, the Vice Squad, all those different guys in town to try to find those wolves and get them taken out. Because not only are they a danger to you, they're a danger to all the rest of the people under the bridge. So 75% of the people we serve are between 40 and 70 years old. And they are becoming victims to these folks that are just preying on them like wolves.
Okay.
And it's also engagement. Engage with the people that you meet. Don't be so fearful of them. Oftentimes, homeless people are just like we are. They've just gone through a series of circumstances. And oftentimes that helps you realize that if they're looking for help, you have solutions, if you have places to send them, better than walking away, as some do, saying it's a problem I don't want to touch.
Okay, final question?
Hi, my name is Angelia Moore, and I am currently a resident of Austin Street Shelter. And I just want to say that from the time I arrived there, July 1st will be a year there. They've walked me through everything. I'm getting ready to get housing. They helped me find a job and all of this. And what I want to say, the panel of directors is great, but what I want to know is there something in place that people like myself, when you get yourself together, or people who are still homeless, putting together a panel of people like myself who have first-hand experience.
Yes, I love it.
We talk to each other. We have compassion and empathy.
Yeah.
I want to know if you all are opposed to something like that at the individual shelter.
That's Tanya. That's a question for Tanya.
Yeah.
Right.
Actually, we are going to be having 6 to 8 different public meetings over the next 6 weeks, and that is going to cover a lot of topics. It's going to cover mental health, housing, shelters, but one element of that and one piece of that is on engaging people who are currently experiencing homelessness and getting their feedback. So if you'll see me afterwards, I'll give you that information, and we'll be reaching out to the different shelters and the different agencies to encourage people to attend, because we absolutely want to hear from you as well and hear your feedback. Sure. So tomorrow night, we're having a second meeting in East Dallas, and it will be on homeless in East Dallas. Please attend. We'll be having other meetings over the next several weeks. Please put them on your calendar. Encourage other people to join the conversation. We've got the boards outside that you can put more Post-it notes. Please fill out your survey. Please email. Keep talking about it. Thank you for coming.
Thanks, guys. Thanks to the panel.
This is William, hopefully your favorite videographer from Two Hats Publishing. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like it, please leave comments below, or like, follow, or subscribe to us and get notices of all our videos. We love it, even when you call.